My name is Alan Dale. I am given today the honor of reading Greg R. Parker's Sirhan, Sirhan, Peace, Love, and Understanding Among the Psychedelic Fascists, Lay of the Land. The post-1967 Summer of Love West Coast vibe has been described as a haven for psychedelic fascists, wolves hunting lambs amid the detritus of a decaying society, but where the baubles of hope and wisdom, free love and true charity still hung as the magnets. The level of decay was in direct proportion to the number of freelancing prophets, sects, and occult societies gathering adherents. When the people are hungry, feed them bullshit is the unstated motto of every con man and woman who ever pitched a tent, commandeered a soapbox, sold snake oil, or promised salvation, universal wisdom, or the power to obtain all you wish. It was no place for a young Christian Jordanian refugee whose childhood memories were of watching neighbors being literally blown to bits, and whose father abandoned his family soon after arriving in the United States. Let's not forget that the backdrop to the June 1968 Robert F. Kennedy assassination was a deeply unpopular war and the recent assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of the few who might truly deliver any respite at all from the excesses of greed and conflict and the privations caused by lack of education or institutionalized inequality was Robert Kennedy. Sirhan Bashara Sirhan was the ultimate lamb, making it supremely ironic that Sirhan translates as wolf. Labels. Originally, Sirhan had been accused of committing the assassination of Robert Kennedy because RFK had affirmed that he would go ahead with the sale of 50 fighter jets to Israel, and Sirhan believed the jets would be used against his homeland. But as Philip Melanson has pointed out, the jets were originally promised by President Lyndon Johnson in January 1968, though it must be added the exact number of jets was not settled, and that even by September of that year, Johnson was not committing to 50. Humphrey, McCarthy, and Nixon were all supporters of Israel and of the sale of the jets. Melanson goes on to discuss political scientist James W. Clark's attempts to construct a workable timeline that pinpoints the catalyst for Sirhan's obsession. Clark nominated a newspaper article of January 9, in which Kennedy is quoted as saying that the U.S. should supply whatever weapons needed to offset whatever the Russians were supplying the Arabs so that Israel can protect itself. This was not an outlier policy. It was mainstream and had bipartisan support. In fact, the only real objections were coming from the Pentagon, which was worried that the sale might leave the U.S. short in Vietnam. 2 months after RFK was enunciating his policy on military aid to Israel, Israel attacked Jordan. UPI reported in part that Israel came under rebuke from the Vatican for its reprisal thrust into Jordan, and the Soviet Union said Israel must be punished for threatening world peace. Both sides claimed victory in the 15-hour battle Thursday that sent Israeli jets and tank columns smashing into Jordanian territory. It would be May before Sirhan's alleged homicidal rage against just a single proponent of this mainstream policy would manifest itself in his writings. In support of this, one of the two news clippings allegedly found in Sirhan's pockets after his arrest was from the May 26 issue of the Pasadena Independent Star News by columnist David Lawrence. This article noted in part that Kennedy favored aid to Israel with arms if necessary to meet the threat of the Soviets. It seems that both Melanson and Clark were unaware of this story or its alleged discovery on Sirhan, along with other pocket litter. The flip side of this is that Kennedy had qualified the provision of military aid in both the January articles cited by Melanson and Clark and in the May article Sirhan is said to have had on him. This aid was provisional, upon it being necessary to offset the aid being offered to Arab countries by the Soviets. It's what we call wiggle room. Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty was one of those politicians who started somewhere on the left and drifted with glacier-like efficiency to the right, along the way seeing communist opponents everywhere and endorsing Richard Nixon over fellow Democrat John F. Kennedy in 1960. One day after the assassination, Yorty went public, proclaiming that Sirhan was motivated or directed by communist influences. It was one of a flood of false reports trying to link Sirhan to communists. The Yorty accusations were based on a 2.5-year-old police report that a car registered to Sirhan's brother, Adel, was seen in the vicinity of the hall used by the Marxist-based W.E.B. Du Bois Club. A statement by a postman that he delivered to Sirhan what he suspected was communist literature, and that according to Sirhan's notes, RFK had to die by June 5, a date that Yorty falsely claimed was being marked by the Black Panthers to be the first day of Black revolutionary protest. As it turned out, the literature being delivered to Sirhan was not communist in nature. It was from the Arab Student League, and Adele's card had likely been borrowed by Sirhan the day it was seen near the W.E.B. Du Bois Club. Sirhan had an old school friend named Walter Crowe, who was a member. So Sirhan was an anti-Semite, or a communist, or a pro-Black power. Whatever he was most certainly anti-RFK, and it was one of those first three that was the cause of his anti-RFK-ism. At least that is what we're supposed to believe. Although the anti-Semite tag has been the most popular meme, when drilling down, there is no more basis for it than the other labels. Yes, he was certainly no fan of Israel, but given his background, this is entirely understandable. In any case, many around the world oppose Israeli occupation of the West Bank without being anti-Semites. Ironically, on May 18, while Sirhan was writing that, quote, "My determination to exterminate RFK is becoming more of an unshakable obsession," close quote. RFK was at the University of Kansas making the point that as important as stopping the Vietnam War is, there were other critical election issues such as poverty, the problems inherent in major cities, and race relations. But equal to those, he listed what he called another type of poverty, a poverty of satisfaction, purpose, and dignity. There was no mention made of Israel. It was a speech which would have had a positive impression on Sirhan had he heard it. The occult. It is well established that Sirhan was a member of AARC on and off from 1966, having lessons by correspondence, and that he was showing interest also in theosophy. What has been missed, or at least misunderstood, is an understanding that he was also studying sex magic as practiced by Aleister Crowley. It should not be a surprise. There was much crossover between AARC, theosophy, and Crowley's Thelema and Ordo Templi Orientis. In fact, according to a prominent publisher specializing in these areas, although neither of those two groups, AARC and Rosicrucian rival the Fraternitas Rosae Crucis, were ever practitioners of black magic, they both do have links to sex magic. According to a former employee of the Broughton bookstore, Sirhan had been in there on 5 or 6 occasions looking for books on metaphysics, cultism, Eastern religious teachings, and on one occasion, black magic. Whether or not he was successful in finding such literature, the term black magic appears in his notebook, along with obscure references to sex magic rituals as described in Crowley's Book of Lies. The misspellings in his notes suggest, however, that he was not learning from literature, but verbally from another party. Indeed, though such rituals can be performed solo, the norm would be in tandem with at least one other. An alternative explanation for the bad spelling and other issues is that Sirhan was being instructed via a shortwave radio he kept in his room. It has been suggested as far back as 2011 that this radio played a part in what transpired in the Ambassador Hotel on June 5, 1968. According to Professor Daniel P. Brown of Harvard, it is possible that the radio was used for both waking, coercion, persuasion, and hypnosis. Brown is an expert in hypnosis and spent long periods of time with Sirhan, calling him one of the most hypnotizable subjects he has ever assessed. I might add that drugs may also have been put into the so-called cakes of light used in at least one of the rituals, though this would need to assume he was given these cakes and did not make them himself. The Star Sapphire. The Star Sapphire is a sex magic ritual described by Crowley in chapter 36 of his Book of Lies. All sex magic rituals are used to manifest your innermost desires. They would not be used, for example, to enable you to pick up a gun and shoot someone, since even if that is your innermost desire, you do not need magic to manifest the ability to do it. In Sirhan's case, it is far more likely he was trying to attract both money and the affections of one Peggy Osterkamp, on whom he had a crush. Someone else, however, may use such rituals to manifest their desire for you to pick up a gun and shoot someone. Just remember that all magicians are deceivers and that all magic is deceit, and some people are happy with that arrangement. The word sapphire is written phonetically under a series of triangles, some overlapping to form hexagrams. According to this ritual, a red triangle is the descending tongue of grace. The blue triangle is the ascending tongue of prayer. Joining them to form the hexagram is symbolically interlocking God and man. Such rituals date back to ancient Egypt. For example, the sacred ritual of Ankh-Ha, which is also known as the ritual of the sacred triangles. Here you form the six-pointed star, known as the triad of light and darkness. Note that Sirhan has written the word trine above sapphire, which has a similar meaning in the occult to the word triad used in the ancient Egyptian ritual. Sex rituals, as the name implies, are sexualized rituals, and as stated, are usually, but not always, performed with at least one other. It is not possible to tell from Sirhan's writings if he actually conducted such rituals, let alone if he had any helping hands. But what they do show at the very least is an interest in them, and therefore an interest in what he may be able to manifest by using them. Sirhan was often teased at school and in his workplace about his lack of girlfriends. It must have burned. It burned enough, at least, to turn to unusual remedies. And Peggy was cute with that little turned-up nose. Another carrot used by both the occult and intelligence agencies is money, where the target has a weakness or real need for it. And again, we see references to large sums of money in Sirhan's writings, along with some evidence of enmity towards those of wealth, including remarks made about RFK's wealth to the bartender at the Ambassador. There are no known indications that such enmity goes back any further than any of the other concerns that consumed him during 1968. The question stands, if Sirhan had a partner in performing these rituals to help him manifest wealth and the girl of his dreams, was that person busy manifesting the assassination of RFK using Sirhan? A name that crops up later in the notebook is Tom Troward. Troward is the granddaddy of the modern self-improvement movement and the source for much of the material used in The Secret, which promises you'll learn how to use the secret in every aspect of your life: money, health, relationships, happiness, and in every interaction you have in the world. Troward was an English author who died in 1916. His works influenced the New Thought movement and mystic Christianity. The New Thought movement was a U.S. attempt to amalgamate ancient wisdom. It currently encompasses metaphysics, positive thinking, as popularized by Norman Vincent Peale, the laws of attraction, healing, life force, creative visualization, and personal power, all branded under different labels and monetized by hustlers to the nth degree. The Mass of the Phoenix. Sirhan had the term black magic written in his notebook. This was a few pages after the entry about the star sapphire. Under it, we see the number 44. The last two lines have reference to the 10 degrees or levels to be attained in AARC. Chapter 44 of Crowley's Book of Lies concerns the Mass of the Phoenix, a one-person ritual involving the consumption of a homemade wafer Crowley called a cake of light. There are a number of different ingredients that can go into a cake of light, although it must include some bodily fluids. One ingredient that can be used is port wine, and port wine is also mentioned in Sirhan's notes. Debunking the Dr. William Joseph Bryan myth. Bryan was charged in Nevada with furnishing liquor to a minor, an 18-year-old girl. It was further alleged that he was discussing the concept of free love with her at the time. He was extradited from California in 1961 to face the charges filed by D.A. William Raggio. Raggio would later become embroiled in the Sinatra Jr. kidnapping on both a personal and professional level. He was a friend of Old Blue Eyes. Later still, Raggio would have a major dispute with Jim Garrison over the latter's investigation into the JFK assassination. Bryan claimed the charge was politically motivated. At the time of the incident, he was running for local office in Sparks. Convicted and fined $1,000, Bryan later surrendered his license to practice medicine in that state. During a 1973 Dallas murder trial in which Bryan had been called as an expert witness for the defense, he was forced to admit under cross-examination that he was currently serving 5 years on probation with the California Board of Medical Examiners after being found guilty of sexual misconduct with 4 female patients. One of the conditions of his probation was that whenever respondent shall perform any treatment upon a female patient involving hypnosis or other therapy, he shall have an adult female present as an observer, or such hypnosis or therapy shall be otherwise visually monitored by such adult female. Some claims both about and by Bryan have proven impossible to verify, especially the uncited claims found in Uber conspiracy books, including that he was a fundamentalist preacher and another that he was a bishop of the Old Catholic Church. One, however, made by Bryan himself, can be ticked as true. He was indeed the grandson of multiple presidential candidate and anti-Darwinian crusader William Jennings Bryan. His father, WJB's only son, William Jr., made a name for himself as U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona and serving as Regent of the University of Arizona. In 1921, he moved to Los Angeles and practiced law at the office of Isidore B. Dockweiler. WJB Jr. then served as a federal commissioner for the San Francisco Exposition of 1939. This was the year following his appointment by President Roosevelt as Collector of Customs for the Port of Los Angeles. Another claim by Bryan, which may be true, is that he was a technical consultant for the movie The Manchurian Candidate. Whilst it has not been verified, it has at least been verified that he had similar roles in the cult classics Tales of Terror and Dementia 13. One more unverified claim in conspiracy books is that he was a drummer for a short period in the Tommy Dorsey band. However, I suspect that Bryan is being mixed up with singer Brian Anthony, who had a short stint with the band. Bryan also claimed he had been the one-time Air Force Chief of Medical Survival Training. This has been extrapolated by various conspiracists into his having worked in the covert brainwashing unit of the Air Force. For the record, here is what it actually refers to. Medical survival training, including specialized training for one's specialty as a Special Operations Command medical officer, health administrator, physician assistant, or any specialist under AFSC 48X to ensure success during an operation while in the field with limited supplies. At a stretch, and it is a big one, this may include mind control techniques, though his self-described expertise in brainwashing is hardly supported by his known futile attempts to use such techniques on females for his own personal pleasure. Bryan was the hypnotist who helped Albert DeSalvo remember how he committed the murders associated with the Boston Strangler. There are reasonable grounds to believe that Bryan fed DeSalvo information that lent credence to the eventual confession via leading questions. Of some interest is that Sirhan had written in his notebook, quote, "God help me, please help me, salvo, 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 D, salvo, die, S, salvo," close quote. Some use that as evidence of Sirhan having been hypnotized by Bryan. But this would make the whole plot amateur hour if true. What plotters, who would obviously know about the automatic writing already implicating Sirhan, would allow the DeSalvo entry to remain in the book when it leads straight back to the hypnotist they used? It is more likely that Sirhan read about the hypnosis used on DeSalvo and subconsciously understood that he himself was getting in too deep. In 1974, David Rendon, science editor for the National Education Association, did a 4-part series exposing the American Institute of Hypnosis run by Bryan. The AIH had been operating since 1956, teaching hypnosis and acupuncture. Rendon exposed it by simply forking over the dollars for a 4-day course on medical, dental, and surgical acupuncture. At the end of the course, he not only received a certificate for acupuncture, but also a certificate stating he had satisfactorily completed prescribed courses of study and having presented proper credentials and having demonstrated thorough knowledge and proficiency in the use of hypnosis, and was hereby elected to membership in the Professional Association Division of the American Institute of Hypnosis. Trouble was, not once during the course did he or any other participant receive any training whatsoever in hypnosis or its use. Then again, nor did any of them actually administer acupuncture needles to themselves or others, with or without guidance. In short, the AIH was a diploma mill And to add a touch of audacity, it also offered courses in the successful treatment of sexual disorders. This was run by the sexual predator himself, Dr. Bryan. Brochures for this course advise participants to wear comfortable clothing, that many new and unusual teaching methods will be employed, including 3 laboratory sessions, a special demonstration session of artificial aids, a film on frigidity, and a 3.5-hour workshop. The best part? He referred to himself in these brochures as Big Daddy. At this point, a brief word on his Wikipedia entry is necessary. I am not among those who dismiss Wikipedia out of hand. Such dismissal shows a basic misunderstanding of how any encyclopedia is compiled and what types of records can be used as citations. As with any source of information, you need to check the citations used for any particular entry before accepting or dismissing it. That said, the Wikipedia entry for Bryan is abysmal, noting the Christian Turner hypothesis that Sirhan had been hypnotized by Bryan to fire blanks at RFK, while making only cursory mention of some of the misconduct charges he had faced, and no mention at all of the very real question mark over the legitimacy of his institute. In fact, it uses a single source to make him appear to be an important figure in the development of hypnosis in therapy. Bryan was a self-promoting scam artist and sex fiend. His claim of having been involved in CIA programs like MKUltra are not only not supported by any documentation as far as it can be ascertained, but come to us only via prostitutes he had bragged to. Having checked the claim in many books and online sites without finding a single citation in support, except on Wikipedia, which cited a book that accepted Bryan's bragging as gospel, this is the only evidence that exists. As pointed out previously, his use of hypnosis to take advantage of young women failed miserably, assuming they were programmed to forget. That alone shows he was not up to the job of programming a patsy. The suspension of disbelief when it comes to Bryan is not a one-off in conspiracy literature. The sad fact is that any claim by anyone can get a free pass if it can be assimilated into the theory being pushed. Love, peace, and understanding. A few names in Sirhan's notebook have drawn little, if any, attention. Maybe because some are misspelled and therefore are not recognized, or maybe because the names run counter to the preferred narratives and labels applied to Sirhan and therefore need to be ignored. Let's start with the name written as Wahiduddin. This is a misspelling of Wahiduddin, as in Wahiduddin Khan, an Indian Islamic scholar and peace activist born January 1st, 1925. He received numerous awards for his peace activism and was listed as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. In 2001, he founded the Center for Peace and Spirituality. However, it was back in 1967 that he started to address public and private gatherings to advocate for policies which were nationalist, internationalist, and interfaith in nature. Now looking at other words and names on that page. Sukrut. This is a misspelling of the Sanskrit word sukrut, which translates as good work, deeds, or virtuous. Illuminati. While the Illuminati are the bad guys in many conspiracy theories, historically its members wanted to drag the world from the darkness of superstition. It is not known in what way Sirhan understood the society, but it was and remains a misused term of division. Al-Hilal. This is probably a reference to the Egyptian arts magazine of the same name. It has been published monthly since 1892 and is the type of magazine that Sirhan would have had delivered and which was wrongly suspected of being communist in nature. Master Kathomi, according to Madame Blavatsky, was a Mahatma who later became an ascended master and was one of the inspirations for theosophy. Historians believe now that Kuthumi never existed, but rather was an invention of Blavatsky to support her work on theosophy. Despite such skepticism, theosophists continued to accept Kuthumi as doorkeeper to the ancient mysteries and as a world teacher alongside Jesus. Tellingly, perhaps, he is also known among adepts as a master psychologist, a sponsor of youth, and a master of unconditional love and non-judgment. Kulthum is a misspelling of Kulthum, an Egyptian singer, songwriter, and film actor covering a 50-year span between 1920 and 1970. She is a national icon in Egypt and has inspired several Western performers, including Bob Dylan, noted for her improvisational ability. She famously sang live on air during the Six-Day War against Israel. "We will come back by force of arms. The Arab army is with you. The tragedy of Palestine pushes you towards the border. The victory is for you." Abdel Wahab, whose full name was Muhammad Abdel Wahab, was another famous Egyptian singer, songwriter, and actor of the period, known for his patriotic songs, including nationalist and revolutionary anthems such as Masir Tam El Hana, O Egypt, Happiness is Here, and Yadnismet El Horia, The Breeze of Freedom. Saut and Saut are alternative spellings for a type of urban music found in Kuwait and Bahrain. The full meaning here is yet to be found. In Arabic, it translates as sound. The second part of the word written by Sirhan is a misspelling of ushak, which is a Persian-style rug, the same type that appears in folklore as flying carpets. It appears then that Sirhan was indicating a rug used in occult practices, prayer, or music recitals. Besem is an Arabic male given name. Conclusions. At Sirhan's 1969 trial, hypnotist Bernard Diamond testified that the case was an astounding instance of mail-order hypnosis, dissociated trances, and the mystical occultism of Rosicrucian mind power and black magic. In short, the defense would argue that Sirhan acted under mind control, but it was self-induced. I would argue that this defense was correct, but incomplete. Sirhan can be likened to a computer infected with a malicious AI program. We have seen the meme 100 times in science fiction. In Sirhan's case, someone was feeding him material and wiring him to make connections after he had placed himself under hypnosis. This could have been done in person or via shortwave radio. Another analogy might be someone taking over your social media profiles, your recognizable face to the world, in order to profit or to do you and or others harm, often with the damage done before you even realize there is a problem. We can see by virtue of having decoded some of the words in his notes how the narrative toward killing RFK was spun. Sukrut, do good deeds. What are good deeds? Spreading peace and enlightenment like the Illuminati. Wahaduddin Khan and Master Kuthumi. Those are doers of good deeds. Defending one's homelands against Israel is a good deed and will bring peace. Listen to the patriotic songs of Kulthum and Muhammad Abdel Wahab and become inspired. And finally, those who aid Israel, like RFK, must die in the interest of peace. Sirhan's entry into this quagmire of deceit was being 23, fatherless, rudderless, and without a girlfriend, but with a giant crush on one young lady who had a turned up nose, and who knows, possibly even a liking for polka dot dresses. And so he drifted toward the wolves with their shingles hanging so prominently, with their promises of good fortune, self discovery, and magic. The plotters certainly knew his type in females and found someone who would be sure to catch his eye at the ambassador. She would pull the Sirhan trigger. Of course, no one would rely on someone like Sirhan to hit and kill the target. He was simply there as a diversion and to take the fall, regardless of where his bullets went. As in the assassination of JFK, if you control the evidence and the witnesses, you control the narrative, especially if your designated fall guy is dead or robbed of memory. Precedent case. For a precedent case, we go back to the April 9, 1948 assassination of Colombian politician Jorge Gaetan in Bogota, the nation's capital. Both Gaetan and Robert Kennedy were young, charismatic liberal leaders on the campaign trail. Both Gaetan and Robert Kennedy were seen as a danger to the status quo. Both were shot by pistol at close range in front of multiple witnesses. Suspicious characters were seen with the accused in the lead up to the gunfire and left the scene immediately after it. The alleged assassins, Juan Roa Sierra and Sirhan Bishara Sirhan, were 26 and 24 years old, respectively. Both alleged assassins were raised in fatherless homes. Both came from superstitious cultures. Both were in and out of employment. Both saw themselves as having much more potential than circumstances were allowing them. Both drifted towards the occult for answers to their situations. Both kept notebooks with strange entries. Both became members of the California cult known as AARC via correspondence. Both practiced self-hypnosis under instruction from AARC. Both practiced rituals aimed at obtaining all they desired under instruction from AARC. While Sirhan claimed no memory of what happened at the time he pulled out his pistol and began firing, Roa was killed by a mob before he could give any information. In both cases, sections of the media, some U.S. government departments and agencies, and conservative politicians tried to lay the blame at the feet of communists, with many on the left blaming political foes, religious extremists, and corporates backed by U.S. military and/or intelligence networks. Courtesy of Greg R. Parker. Thank you for listening.